Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. We have a great show. In the first hour, we have Stephen and Evan Strong talking about antiquities in Australia, a forbidden history that most people don't want us to know about, but we're going to find out here on Just Energy Radio. And in the second hour, Paul Von Ward is going to be talking about the children of the living universe. And, you know, it's always interesting. You book guests, and then some days, a lot of days, they just flow into each other. And I have a feeling that this show is just going to be one giant flow. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluation, psychic readings, and energy healing. So visit soulhealer.com if you have things going on in your life, problems at work, problems in your relationships, problems with your health. Give me a call, send me an email, fill out the contact form online, and we can set up a time for a private consultation for you, even by Skype. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today with our free 50-page intuition guide. So go to appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and get our free guide. It's free to download, which is always cool. If you missed an episode of Just Energy Radio, please stop by our website, justenergyradio.com. Check out the episode, sign up for our weekly newsletter. Or you can go to YouTube, Just Energy Radio on YouTube, and check out the episodes there. But if you go there, please subscribe to the channel. Let's see, couple of quick announcements. This weekend is the Tyler Paranormal Conference in Tyler. Why do I keep saying Tyler, California? Tyler, Texas. I'll be there. And then August 16th is the Ancient Mysteries International Conference in Collinsville, Illinois. And that's it for me for announcements right now. So let me introduce you to our guests and get them on the air, because I had to control myself with the amount of questions I wrote down, but I think we're going to have a very full hour. So Stephen Strong is an Australian-based researcher, historian, author, and former high school teacher with a background in archaeology. He was involved in the formation of a graduate diploma of Aboriginal education for the NSW Department of Education, writing units on traditional law and contemporary history. He also authored the highly successful Aboriginal Australian, a language and cultural kit. Stephen has spent many years learning and living with the Barjungla, I'm not even going to try to say that word, Language Confederation, and I love these names. Gamalori, I don't know, people of Northern NSW. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Steve and Evan Strong. Hi, guys. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Nice try with the original words there, but they are really a mouthful. We find them difficult too, so no shame in that.
Well, I have a hard time just with regular words, and those are like, and there really wasn't any way around them. I couldn't just kind of skip over them. So,
no, they are tricky. No problems at all.
So, I sometimes am really politically incorrect. So I'm just going to start with a really politically incorrect statement and question. Based on your guys' pictures, I'm going to make the assumption that you're not Aboriginal and you're not, from the indigenous nation of Australia. So what got you interested in studying ancient Australia in the first place?
Well, to begin with, from my point of view, it comes out of teaching. Because from the time I started teaching, I started to gravitate towards the Aboriginal children and what they were doing. And over the time I taught, I became more and more involved, taught in areas where there were mainly Aboriginal kids in the school, and won the trust. Because what I found is if the kids trust you, they go back home and tell the parents, and if the kids think well of you, then the parents think well of you. It was really easy to do. And then they started to show us different sites, told us stories. And as I started I was involved in helping to write the senior course for New South Wales, I came into conflict with the organiser because I knew what we were teaching was wrong. And I knew the elders didn't want this to be taught. And it became quite hostile. I actually stormed out of one of the meetings and went back to Moree because I just couldn't work with them anymore. And from that, they kept giving us and showing us, and we had to make a decision. Do I keep teaching and do this on the side, or do I give up the teaching and do this? So that's what actually took place. It was a combination of they gave us so much information and so many of their truths that have been hidden. We had to make a decision, and my decision was, well, I'll stop teaching and just see what happens. So it came out of that.
And you, Evan?
Well, I started studying at university, anthropology and archaeology, and was kind of, I guess, following in the footsteps. But I kind of grew up with Steve in those communities and in those places. So for me, it was how I grew up. So I guess it's always been an interest for me. And we kind of then just started writing books together, and yeah.
And Evan, of course.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to add to that Evan actually, when Evan was born, he was conceived. I happen to know that for a fact, on one of the most sacred sites. And when we actually started off, when we lived on this sacred site. And Evan would obviously, when he was 2 and 3, would be talking to Aboriginal spirits who were talking to them. And of course, we were clever enough not to realise not to stop that. So from the very beginning, we actually lived on an incredibly sacred site. So that, in one respect, was probably the most important part.
So
because that was something we both shared.
Born into it, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Literally. You brought up a really interesting point right at the very beginning, Steve, about the native culture sharing all of their wisdom with you. Why do you think there is so much resistance, from the Western world of their theory of what their history is and their history?
It's an inconvenient truth because it doesn't fit at all. You see, all the other continents, you've got a mixture of civilizations that have come and gone, and they've had different technologies, and you can't delineate between one and the other. In Australia, the books tell us before Captain Cook stole this country, there was no one here. It was a stick and stone technology and just the Aboriginal people. Now, the archaeology we're seeing and the stories they tell us are in open contradiction, not just with the Australian history, but the global history. It virtually demands a rewrite of everything we understand and know. And when you start to challenge, established paradigms, and one that comes to mind is that we're told that we are belligerent, warlike creatures, and that's why we spend 50 cents on every dollar in the world on security measures and warlike machines and doing things to protect ourselves from one another. The original people say, no, that's not how we lived. We are peaceful, cooperative beings, and what we've fallen into in the last 5,000 or 6,000 years is a trap. They're writing not only just a different history, but a different complexion of what we were as human beings and what our roles were. And that challenges fundamental concepts that underpin our society today. And we're of the belief that up until around 7,000 years ago, when money and farming and division of labour came into being, the whole world lived under the precepts of the dreaming. And we've got to remember, in Australia, I'm not saying that men don't fight, because that's just part of what we are. But in Australia, when the men fought, they could never go on to another's territory. They could never take anything. They couldn't steal anything. They couldn't even walk there. So they'd find an agreed place to fight, and the women would watch, the women would tend, and then when the time was right, when everyone had finished and got it out of their system, they'd walk away. And rarely, if anyone, was killed. So yes, they fought, but they found ways to control this. And it was a system where everyone cooperated, where there was peace amongst everyone. And then we now have a new way of doing things. And I think that the old way scares them. So they don't want to hear it, because it calls into question fundamental notions of our society today.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to share something that I know is going to be hard for you to share. But from the contemporary worldview, because we're going to be changing this as we move forward. But from the contemporary worldview, what is the history of Australia? Because I want to give, we're in the United States, a lot of my listeners, and so I'd like to give them, the contrast. This is what the textbooks say, and then we're going to take that to somewhere else.
Okay. The textbooks, well, yes, I was involved in handing them out to children, but I told them to throw them away. The textbooks tell us that of probably all the Indigenous people, the original people were probably a little less advanced, because they didn't even have the bow and arrow. So when the whites came here in 1770 and then 1788, they came here with absolutely no respect for these people. So this is what they thought. It's a stick and stone technology. They were too ignorant to have clothing, because they didn't wear clothes, just like in the Garden of Eden. That they had no form of government. In fact, they weren't even recognised as proper people. And then for the the English government stole Australia under the concept of what's called terra nullius, which means they are there, but they are so unworthy a people. They cannot organise themselves. They don't have a law. They don't have a government. They have no concept of self. Therefore, the whites have the right to steal this country, because they didn't farm it. They didn't make fence. They did nothing. They did no buildings. Therefore, it is not theirs. And by right, because the whites were a far higher race, they had the right to take over this country because of their unworthiness. Now, the worst part of the story is that because of that, no treaty was ever signed with any original person. At least in America, there were treaties signed. Yes, I know they're all broken, but at least there was something to be broken. In Australia, no treaty was ever signed, no recognition was given, and it really was the worst form of apartheid you'll ever see. I can tell you in 1838, the Sydney Morning Herald said it would be a greater crime to kill a dog or an animal than it would be to kill an original person.
Now, it wasn't until 1969
yes.
The original people were still considered as part of the flora and fauna.
They were counted as kangaroos and wallabies were. In 1969, they changed the legal act to say we now recognise original people as semi-human. I've got to tell you, never human, because they still haven't got that far. They were taken off the list with animals and trees in 1969. Before that, they were legally, you compare South Africa, at least the South African Indigenous people were considered people. We didn't even get that here until 69. So that gives you a general flavour. And you see, the reason we had to treat them like that is because if we recognise them as being equal, then the concept of terra nullius, stealing another nation, if they are proper people, doesn't apply. So we were bound to treat them less than any other race on this planet. And that is the true history, ladies and gentlemen. We're not making it up. I taught it, and I know what was written. And that's the truth of it all.
Did the native people have to go through a whole civil unrest, kind of like the African-American population in the United States, to gain rights in their own country?
The original people are incredibly peaceful, passive, dignified. They did, yes, they did something very similar that you guys will understand. They went on a freedom ride with buses and they drove through the middle of New South Wales and turned up at places to try and agitate and bring, but they used the Martin Luther King approach of peaceful protests. They never rose and picked up arms and fought us, which I'm surprised, to be honest, because they had every damn right to do so. I do remember we taught in Moree, and there's a famous story that when they turned up, the two busloads, and there were whites and Aboriginal people together in those busloads, they went to the pool in Moree, where Aboriginal people were not allowed to swim with the whites because they catch diseases, wouldn't they, Evan? And all sorts of horrible things. Yeah. And they demanded to go in. And all of the pubs were alerted and all the white fellas came out of the pubs ready to fight. And it was going to be on. And then this one Aboriginal woman came up to the front and she started pointing to each of the men that were there and saying, I know you came down to our camp and were sleeping with so-and-so. And this guy would walk away and she started naming each of these men that had been using Aboriginal people and raping some of the women in front of everyone. And one by one, they ran away. And then the Aboriginal people stormed the bars and went inside and jumped in the pool. And that was the first time, because before that, as teachers, when we were doing swimming carnivals, we'd take the white kids to the pool and time them. Then we had to take the Aboriginal kids down to the creek and time them. So it shows you how ingrained our country was, very similar to the southern states of America, but I suspect a little bit worse.
I think so. I mean, it sounds really bad.
Well, there are only two shops in Moree that are allowed to walk inside. And when they went to the movies, they were roped off in the first 4 rows. And if there were 5,000 Aboriginal people wanting to get in, once those first 4 rows were filled up, off they went. They weren't allowed to go to public toilets. So I don't know how it was in the South America, but I think you're going to find it was pretty tough here. But they never rose to arms. They never fought us.
I guess it's my turn.
Oh, sorry.
Well, it just kind of dropped off and then I heard nothing. You mentioned earlier about them, the Captain Cook or whatever, saying that they had no technology. And actually, I've heard that. What led him to believe that they didn't have any technology?
Ignorance. I've got to tell you something. On the day that he raised the flag, we've seen his journal. And in his journal, he mentions he saw an Aboriginal person walk down the hill with a bow and a bundle of arrows. Never been written into any text. You see, here's the trick. They had technology and had wisdom that we didn't know about, but because we rushed in and we took and we stole, they didn't show us. They didn't show us. We're going to a site next week where there's talk of a technology I can't even believe that the Aboriginal people claim they have. And it's an amazing site, isn't it, Evan?
Yeah, unbelievable.
Unbelievable site. It looks like it is an ancient civilization. And we assumed, and we're hearing talk that they made it. Now, I don't know how they could do it. I'm looking at a 10-ton rock that was picked up and moved and cut into a cube. But we're hearing talk of that. Why would they tell us? We came and stole. We raped, we killed, we gave them blankets full of smallpox, we poisoned their food, we poisoned their water holes. They had nothing to share with us, so they kept it quiet. So what Cook, Phillip and others saw was an Indigenous hunter-gatherer group, which they were, and they had stick and stone technology. But they had a lot more, and had some things they'd abandoned, which they knew about, and some things they still had. But they had no inclination to share because we didn't deserve that right. You see, we were talking to Auntie Bev, bless her soul, she just passed on yesterday, and she told us one of the archaeologists we really thought was good value was doing the same thing as all the rest, and that was Professor Elkin. He'd pick up an object and tell them what it was. And as Auntie Bev said, they would say, yes, boss, whatever you say, boss, that's what it is. But it never was. So that was one of the other problems. We came here with our suits and ties and clipboards and we looked upon them not wearing clothes and said, well, then we know what this is. And I'll give you a lovely example that works from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and I'll name the person. Dr. Dwayne Hamacha tracked down a media site, a media hit to within 10 metres through a dreaming story. And then he went to the place and saw it. And he said, well, this is interesting because that media hit took place 1.5 million years ago. And he thought, well, how could the original people have that in their dreaming story? He then decided the answer was this, that they walked past the hole, deduced that a meteor hit that, and then made a story around that. I told the elders that, and they were ropeable. They saw it. That's the only reason. But did Hamacha go and ask them first before he put up his explanation? No. He decided he knew what the answer was, put it up. And then he said, I'm going to go ask them and find out if I'm right. Well, I know what's going to happen. They're going to say, yes, boss, whatever you say, boss, and off you go. See, that's the problem. We haven't come here to ask. We've come here to tell.
Well, and I think it's really insulting that, you know, as Westerners, we make the assumption that we know what stuff is, and discount what other people, indigenous populations, see and believe. Like, they can't tell what happened right in front of their own two eyes, that they're so stupid that they can't describe it.
Well, it's important. You've got to remember, we have a mindset in this country, and I'd love to say that it's gone, but it's still there. Well, if the original people are at the bottom of every scale you want to measure, 25% of the prison population is original, and they make up 2% of our population. You name it, wherever it is, they're at the bottom. So we are perpetuating this myth of their unworthiness. And while by doing that, it creates the same system. Yes, now they're legally people. Yes, we allow them to vote. Lucky people. That doesn't help at all, I can assure you. But in all reality, nothing has changed. And it's interesting you said that, because the history we've been given by the original people, they've told others. It's not as if we're Robinson Crusoe here. We walked in before. They've told others, but they wouldn't listen, so they stopped telling them. It's only because I was given ceremony and the elders started to read our work and then chased us up. And then they spoke to us. We won their trust. Now we're in a situation now where we're getting phone calls from all over the country from elders coming saying, come and see our site and help us protect it, because we just had archaeologists there and they will do nothing for us. So the archaeologists, national parks and wildlife, the government, they're all the enemy for the original people. They can't trust anybody. So what's changed? Nothing. The only thing is now they are sharing their history. They're bringing it up and they're telling people this is what we're really about and this is where we came from.
So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I know that in Australia we find some of the oldest elongated skulls in the world. I also know that there are some of the largest ancient ochre mines in the world. And when I think of both of those, it reminds me of Peru. And so have locations been uncovered for like terrace farming or megalithic structures, you know, with those tight-fitting stones like in Sacsayhuaman, like you do find around the Cusco area?
All we were doing while you were saying that was nodding our head. We don't just have what the original people told us, we have remains. We found some remains. We were working with a gentleman by the name of Klaus Duna from Austria, and he was sending us photographs, and we were going to exactly the same thing. We're taking Graham Hancock to a site next month that is a 40-metre stretch of rocks that are joined together that looks so much like the South American ones. Klaus, we've got a tunnel there which we call Klaus's Tunnel. Now, that tunnel leads into a 75-metre. There's 3 walls that lead into a 75-metre tunnel, and I can't get in past 15 metres because it's collapsed. But those walls are amazing. We have photographs up on our website. People can look at them, and everyone who's seen them said they've come straight out of South America. Is this a South American photo?
It's that same kind of brickwork where you can barely get a cigarette paper in between.
Beautiful
grooves.
joins, and they're cut. Each one is cut for the other. We've got rocks that weigh over a ton that have been placed there, and there is no way. We know one site there, Klaus's Tunnel, where the 3 base rocks, which go all the way across, are 190 and 189 centimetres high. The walls are 292 centimetres high and 293 centimetres high, and they're just stacked rocks cut on top of one another. There's a precision there that it's from South America, but it isn't really because they're all the same thing. It goes around the world. We're working on one now where there is a rock. There are 4 cube rocks we've seen there, haven't there? Yeah. Beautiful cube rocks. One of them sits on a platform. We've been around it. It doesn't belong to anything, and it's got to weigh 10 tonne. And it's 4 metres high by 4 metres across. It was placed there. We're going to get Graham to look at it too, but we're sure it didn't belong there. So what you've got in South America, you want heavy rocks, we've got them. We've got 10 tonnes. If you want joints, you want mortar. We've got mortar between the rocks. We've got another rock platform, another one of Klaus's, another wall that goes for about 50 metres. And they actually mortared it up to the side of a cliff, didn't they?
They did.
And it's spilt on there. So, yes, we have those remains in abundance. And there's no doubt the technology that did this, I mean, one of these places we're going to is granite and quartz-encrusted granite. Well, that's not even Egyptian. They can't cut that. They can do sandstone. We've got another group down near Carryong Bambara that's sandstone, but this one's granite. You need metal or laser. And I've got elders who tell us, no, laser, not metal, laser. At the Carryong Glyphs, Jerry Bostock said, that wasn't cut with metal, that was done with laser. And, of course, we have found the remains next to the Bambara Glyphs of an object which is metal with a crystal encrusted inside it, and it's ancient. And we've only been putting metal. Is
there a picture of that on your site?
Oh, yes, we've got pictures up. All this stuff, we put all the pictures up. But I mean,
of the metal object with the crystal in it. Yes. You have my curiosity going, but I don't want to touch my computer. But I'm going to go look that up as soon as we're done today.
No, if we've put it up, we have it at home. We show people it. We've taken out and shown people and said, this was found in the middle of the bush, in the middle of nowhere. How long have we been making metal and crystal? Probably 20, 30 years. What is it doing here? And it was buried in the ground. It was found through a metal detector. It wasn't on the ground. It was beneath. And we have this stuff, and this is all. Look, we've got engravings of UFOs. We've got the largest one in the world. We know there's much more to this story, and we're finding proper archaeology and science that proves it.
Oh, and the compass too.
Oh, yes, the compass. There's a beautiful engraved compass. It's a perfect circle. A gentleman from Newcastle Uni came and had a look at it and said this. He said, we can do it in the laboratory, but not in the field yet. Now, what's fascinating about that, it's got 8 arms, all perfectly straight, about 1 mil across. When you look inside those arms, it goes down at 90 degrees, across at 180, and back at 90 again, every one of them. It's cut razor sharp. 1 mil across. The circle is a perfect circle without any shape edge on it. And here's the fascinating part. It marks out north and south. In fact, it's got the letter N, hasn't it, Evan?
It does.
And it's 15 degrees off north. It's 15 degrees east of north. So if a European did it, and remember the professor said they can't do it in the field anyway, but just say somebody did do it for some unknown reason. They put it down in the last couple of years but got it off by 15 degrees. What a moron. I don't believe that. We believe it's ancient, and we believe that was cut by laser. And if we can go back to when the Earth was 15 degrees off north, east of north, that may date when that took place. So, yes, we've got technology and we've got evidence that we've been shown doesn't belong to a rock and stick technology. It belongs to something sophisticated and ancient. And I can tell you now, Mr. Cook didn't bring it. It was here well before.
Okay, but I'm gonna come back to something I asked. What about the rock terraces? What are considered the farming terraces? Do you guys have those also?
Yeah, we have them too. Look, we're working on a place called the Standing Stone site that the president of the Australian Archaeological Society in 1939 said was Australia's Stonehenge. He also said it is the first religious mound in the world, and he said it contained all knowledge of what was, what is, and what it'll ever be. And he was the professor, the top academic of this country. It was a 7-tiered terraced mound. And one of the jobs of the gentleman working on there was to count the terraces, measure them, the whole thing. So, yes, we did have that. And they were working on that all the way through 1939. But in 1940, due to the actions of the government, the whole site was destroyed. But we do have the original map, and we have the notes of the professor who was the top academic in the country working on this site, talking about the terraces on those mounds. So the answer is yes, we have it. in word and we have it in description, but unfortunately the government stepped in and trashed the site because they didn't want this to get out.
Well, I think it's interesting that you come up with the 1940 date because it seems like when you read anything that comes out of academia around 1940, everything is shut down. It becomes extremely politically correct.
Well, you know, Rita, the gentleman involved, Dr. Frederick Slater, chosen as the president of the Archaeological Society of Australia, he went out on a limb and he stuck by this. And we've got his letters, so he said, I've shipped a sea of troubles. He told the gentlemen down that were working on the site, don't trust the museum, don't trust the anthropologists, don't trust the museum, don't trust the universities and the government. What happened is he did work all over the country. We've had people working on this. Do you know what? We cannot find one official record, one academic record, one photograph or anything in any media outlet, any computer, anywhere. He was actually expunged from all of academia, and the only things we've ever found about him are through articles in newspapers.
Like letters to the editor.
Letters to the editor and stuff like that was mentioned. We found one of his papers, and he wrote hundreds, and we only found it because the other fellow had his name first, and I think it snuck through. So, in answer to that, this particular site, which we've now found and we've got the map to, that he claimed was greater than Stonehenge, and we believe it is too, the 184 stones, we actually know where they go. And we have elders who've taken us to that site and sung it up, haven't they, Evan?
They have.
They've given us the song of the stone arrangement and the song of the hand signs. And the day is, one day soon, we hope, that we'll put that back together. We'll put the terraces back and we'll place all the rocks where they were.
Kind of like what they've done with Stonehenge.
Yeah, except in Stonehenge, they didn't have a map. We've actually got the map, and we know what each stone means.
So what do you mean by the song of the stone and the song of the hand thing that you mentioned?
Well, it's a tricky one because what Slater found was the first language ever spoken and recorded by humanity. That's what he was working on. Now, this is a language that is 50 times harder than any language we have today because it is so complex. And it was found within the stone arrangement. And at the stage where Slater was slammed, he'd already recorded 28,000 words in the first language. I want you to think about that because we were told the first language was very simple, very basic, and spoke about the most basic emotions. Now, this language is made up of 10 elements, 16 letters of the alphabet, 7 sensory symbols, 21 parts of the body, 38 symbols of the hand because they go with the arrangement too, and over 100 or up more animal signs. When you put it all together, and it's got about 30 suffixes and affixes, the stone arrangements, the way they were placed, because the elder actually showed us how it worked, didn't they, Evan?
Oh, yeah.
He gave us 7 different readings on one rock. We looked at it and saw it as a rock. He was telling us what it meant. The way you place the arrangements, the same hand signs that go with it, make a language, but it is such an erudite and sublime language. And the claim from Slater and the claim from the elders, and our claim too, is this was the tabernacle that humanity was given. This was like not the 10 Commandments, but the first time that whoever was here well before us, whether it be Pleiadians or ancient civilizations, I don't care. They left this particular arrangement as a testimonial. And luckily, Slater had been in contact with Aboriginal people and got records of that first language and could read it. And we have that reading.
Wow. That's pretty intense. But, you know, what you're saying makes total sense to me. You know, one of the things that we had a show on, and I've done some investigation in, is like the Mudras of India, where just, you know, different hand gestures have different, very subtle meanings that add to the conversation, add to the mood, or I'm not really sure how to describe it. So it doesn't surprise me that there are other things that are added, you know, or that are found in older languages that add to the depth and breadth of it, you know, and the much more subtle meaning of it.
Well, there is a link between Australia and India.
Oh,
as well.
strong link, very strong link. And look, there's a genetic link. They did a study about 5 years ago in India, and they went to the tribal people in the south of India, and they did a mitochondrial DNA study, and they found that 7 people weren't Indian. They had unique Australian Aboriginal signatures. The language of the Dravidians is nearly identical to the Tasmanian original, one of the Tasmanian original dialects. There are strong links there, very strong links. You're right about that, but if I can share something with you.
Sure.
I can't use the original languages because I'm not allowed to because they're sacred words, but I'd like to share with your listeners the interpretations of what it said. I think this is really important because some of this is very profound. And if I can read to you, and I'm going to read some of the direct translations from our top academic, and the white fellas are finding it hard to argue with this because it is who it is. It opens with, the breath of God is the divine light of the soul. The light of truth flows like a river of fire from God to the soul of man and woman united. Now, I could read passages like that all the way along. It's a very profound piece of work.
Very esoteric.
Very esoteric, but there's some fascinating clues in here, Rita. One I'm going to read to you now is there's a phrase that keeps repeating itself. And Slater wrote this in 1939, and he wasn't familiar with the UFO story, and he never said that ever once, did he, Evan, in his notes? But he kept writing, came to earth, in his translations. And I kept thinking, well, this is interesting. And I'm going to share a couple with you because it really does open up some areas that are very fascinating. Here's one of the readings. Guided by truth, man came to earth through darkness from the light of life that shines far off. Another one here. The divine light of God gives the soul and the fire which brought life from afar. It goes on like that. The truth that is brought from the fire which brings life from afar. That's another one. Life from afar and came to earth is repeated time after time in Slater's work. He kept repeating it, but he didn't know what it meant, but he surely was reading it properly. And, of course, that sort of information, I'm not so sure our government wants out today. In fact, I know they don't. We know that well.
But it seems to be where people are moving to. You know, with their belief system, I think there are more and more people that believe that there were aliens, not, technology and information that came to the planet in our early history. I believe that they terraformed the planet personally in my own research, but that they've been here for a really long time, kind of meddling in our affairs.
Well, can I share with you, in Australia, we have 500 original nations, and they're all separate. They had different languages, had different creation spirits, different stories, different ceremonies. But there was one story that goes to every one of the 500 tribes. It's the 7 sisters. And the 7 sisters, you ask them, the 7 sisters are the Pleiades. I have been on the phone with elders who've told me, and the words, and I'll try and get this right, one elder always finished with this, don't forget, my grandmother told me my ancestors come from the Pleiades. It is a common story. If I can share with you, and I go to the dreaming stories because that's where we get our information. The great creator is called Byami. His track, when we found his track, is one leg. Because Byami means to create, to cut off. And what he did was, when he came here, he cut off one of his legs to make humanity out of his leg. And he only stayed for a short period of time, then went back up to the sky where he dwelt.
Because he's also called a sky hero.
He's a sky hero. We don't have gods here. We have sky heroes. His wife is called Mula Mula. And she, in the writings there, was not born from the earth. It even says that. The words are, she was not born from the earth. She came down for a while and then went back up into the skies where she dwells with Byami. Now, one of Byami's sons...
So I have a question for you, kind of in that same vein, talking about the creation of mankind. What do you know, and I know I'm going to kill this word, well, both of them. What do you know about the Arunta tribe story of an Inaperta? I'll spell it, Inapertwa.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know the Arunta people, but I'd need to know a bit more of the story if you could to help me.
I can help you. I have
that was wonderful.
Okay, so, now listening to you, I don't know that I can trust the source, but anyway. So this was one of their legends, and it says, first of all, the arms were released, then the fingers were added by making 4 clefts at the end of each arm, then legs and toes were added in the same way. The figure could now stand, and after this, the nose was added and the nostrils bored with the fingers. A cut with a knife made the mouth, which was pulled open several times to make it flexible. A slit on each side separated the upper and lower eyelids, hidden behind which the eyes were already present. Another stroke or two complemented the body, and thus, out of the anorpa, men and women were formed.
Brilliant. I've got no problem with that because we've actually, if you go to the Bambara glyphs, you'll find it is a story of the creation of humanity. And actually at the Bambara glyphs, there is a symbol there, and we're working with Laird Scranton on this. It is in Dogon, and there's about 50 glyphs in there that are Dogon anyway. In Dogon, it means DNA double helix. Now, in this particular panel, which is the first part of the original ancient story on that panel there, it just starts with the 3 circles and the legs. And further down, 3 circles, legs and arms. Further down, 3 circles, legs and arms, and a pyramid in each arm. And then below that, you've got this woman that's pregnant. We know that story is about the creation of humanity step by step. In the dreaming story in Biami, it's very clear. They cut his leg off to create humans. It's very clear what's being said here. The Sky Heroes came here and made us. In Slater's notes, it says they came to this country, they came to this planet to make men and women. Remember, it's men and women here. They don't delineate and say that the rib came out of Adam. No. It came from Biami to make both. There's no change in that. So we are absolutely convinced, and many, many original groups, not all, because a lot of the knowledge is lost, but not with the Arunta, not with the Pintubi and others. Yes, they were made. Yes, they were definitely made. And yes, we know elders that have remains that come from their place, don't we, Evan?
Yeah, we do.
We do. We know one in particular that has stuff that doesn't come from this earth. We know that, and we nearly got to see it, didn't we, Evan?
Nearly.
It was there in front of us, but he got a headache. He said, he started running his head from side to side, and he said, I'm getting a headache. There's someone that shouldn't be here. And he pushed it away. And we were chafing at the bit because we could see blue rocks in there, couldn't we, Evan?
We could. Yeah.
We think, that's got to be Pleiadian. Look, the original people who know, when we go down and see our elder, and I'm allowed to say this, one of the 2 stories he's going to share with us is the story of the star beings. So this is ingrained in their culture. The interesting part is that when we started this story, none of the elders were telling us this, were they, Evan? Not Auntie Bev, bless her heart, nobody. They waited. They drip-feed us a little bit and a little bit more. And when the time was right, they started bringing up the story about the mothership.
The carriers up there.
The carriers, Auntie Bev called them carriers from up there because that's how it was used in amongst their tribe and how it crashed in the waters of Bambara. Never told us that before. Yeah. They just wait. And as we get further along the line, they give us a bit more. I do remember when I was given ceremony by the Ramangeri, Peter Evans came up to me and he said, now, how do you think we got around the world? I said, by boat. He said, yes, we know that. What about the other ways? I said, Peter, I'm never going to talk about that. I've got to have archaeology first. And he said, one day you will. I said, no, I won't. And guess who was right? He was. Yeah, no, they know about this stuff. It's just that the timing up until now wasn't right to share. Now what they want to do is they want to share it with the world.
Well, excellent. I'm glad you're sharing it with me.
Well, that's what we're here for. Well, that was actually when I was given ceremony, the elders gave us the title, which is called Wirichin. In Ramangeri, it means black fella, white fella dreaming, all the same. So therefore, it's all the same. There can't be secrets anymore from the white fellas. They've kept it quiet for 220 years. And as I said to the elders more than once, how does that work out for you? And they've all said the same thing appallingly. So the ones who weren't sure about it, they start to think about this. Well, this hasn't worked, so let's try a different way of approaching things. And what's really encouraging, Rita, is last week the elders met. The old way elders met in the middle. in Alice Springs.
At Uluru, yeah.
And when they met, hawks were circling above them all the time, a great sign, because when we went to the Standing Stones, our elder there called for hawks when he stood at the Standing Stones, and 8 came within a minute and circled above him. So the original people see that as a very strong sign.
Mm.
And so they came again. They came and circled above them, and there's a change afoot. And this time they're all uniting. They have been fighting with each other, but now that's changed. There's a change ahead, believe me. And this is why we do this, because we were asked to get this out, not to the black fellas who know about it, but to the black fellas who don't know about it, and the white fellas and all the other coloured fellas who don't know about it, and women, all of us. We need to know about this stuff. So that's what they're sharing. Our job is to basically act as interlocutors, not to interpret, but to pass on what they tell us. It's not our job to tell them what it is. It's their job to tell us, and then our job is to convince others. So when we're told something, if we're told we're doing UFOs now, and we didn't want to do it, our first three books were published by the University Press of America. They wouldn't touch this sort of stuff, and we never went near it. We don't have a choice now. That's all we ever talk about, because they don't give us a choice.
Mm-hmm. As I like to say, I'm not making it up. I'm just reporting it. However weird it is, I'm just reporting it.
So that's our excuse to it. It's a good one because it's the truth, isn't it?
It is. So we have about 15 minutes, not quite 15 minutes, and this is a very important topic that I know that you're going to want to talk about. But contemporary history claims that humanity emerged from Egypt, or not Egypt, from Africa. So what do you have to say about that theory?
I'm going to start by saying this. About 3 months ago, a student from one of the universities wrote to us on our website, and he said this to us. He said, all the students know that all the mitochondrial DNA evidence, the Y chromosomes, the genome evidence proves there's no link between Australia and Africa. Why is it that the people in mainstream believe this? And so we put up an article, and we went through all the different evidence, and the evidence is absolutely 100% right. The Africans are not where we think they are. It's not the centre. And if I can start, I'll just use one example because we could probably spend 30 minutes on this and it wouldn't help. But the people who wrote the paper that gave us Eve and Out of Africa, Professor Alan Wilson and Rebecca Cann, they were the ones who said that Eve was around, and they gave us a date of 150 to 200,000 years, but they said one word in that paper that no one ever looked at, and they said that Eve probably resided in Africa. And they rightly made the point that genealogy does not give geography. Okay, now what they worked out was they said, okay, Africa first because, and they made this clock, the molecular clock, and said it's 150,000 to 180,000 years. But they based it on Australia. This is very important. It's in their paper, believe me, we know. And they got the numbers by doing this. They said, well, the Australian people came in existence 50 to 60,000 years ago, and they've got 1/3 the genetic diversity. The rest of us were older. 3 times 50 or 60 is 150 to 180. All easy, all done. Every book does that. They all tick it off. What they don't know is that both of these two people independently decided to check their work. Rebecca Cann was first, and she analysed the blood of 26 tribes looking at the mitochondrial DNA. And her findings were as this. She said the original people are not 50,000 years old, but at least 400,000 years old and come from 2 lineages, far more ancient than any other group. She couldn't work it out. And of course, the problem is 2 lineages. Well, Homo erectus is one. What's the other one? Well, we know what the other one is. We've been talking about that. But anyway, she was a junior partner, 1990. She's a woman. That's not going to help her. She's not the senior partner, and she is a woman. So that's not going to help her much. So Alan Wilson comes to Australia, decides, I'm going to check this out. And he samples the mitochondrial DNA in 2 visits, 87 and 89, 31 people, and gets 22 different strands. That's a 70% mutation rate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, every time you get a mutation, it works out to be 3,500 years. So 22 times that is 77,000. And then Cann said this, what if I keep sampling? Will it keep at 70%? How far back will I go? And then he was compelled to make this statement. This is a senior professor, and I know this because I've said it so many times, and I'll get it right word for word. It may be too far out to admit, but while Homo erectus was muddling around in the rest of the world, something dramatically different happened in Australia. For it was here that they got to Australia, and it's here they evolved into Homo sapiens and went out into the rest of the world around 400,000 years ago. The problem is that when Homo erectus gets here, breeds with another thing, we don't know what it is because there's supposed to be no one here but Homo sapiens. So there were some massive question marks. But unfortunately, the year after Wilson made that statement, he died. And everyone decided, well,
I'm sure.
Yeah, so therefore they left it alone. Now, there are Y chromosome studies. One was just done. It's the biggest one ever done. And we've got the paper there. And they looked at 400 individuals and looked at 7 different haplotypes that are African and couldn't find one amongst 400 individuals that weren't African. They went as far as to say, and this is what the Y chromosome study, the largest one ever done, they said that the Africans don't relate to anyone else, not even the Europeans, and they said non-Europeans and Europeans alike have no Y chromosome reaction towards that. And they even did a map for us. And they did this map, and we've got it there. And there they are, 180,000 years. They've marked out the base. And there's a line going down one day to 120,000 years. There's Africa. It's come out of this base. They don't know where the base is. And you look at that small strand for Africa, and it's got 4 lines underneath it. When you look at the strand that goes elsewhere, there's 22 lines. This story about Africa is wrong. It is wrong because the original people have told us. Had a phone call last week from the middle while they were meeting. An elder rang us and said, thank you. We all know we don't come from Africa. Genome studies, Y chromosome, you name it. The largest study of mitochondrial DNA in Australia was done by Roy Simmons, and he's the head of the Commonwealth Serum Laboratory. He got a hold of 1,500 vials of blood, and his findings were as this. He does not know where the original people came from. But the one thing you can guarantee is they're much older than the African people. And I could go much further, but I'll close with this. The oldest Homo sapiens sapien in the world is found in Australia. It's Lake Mungo Man. Mm-hmm. They got his mitochondrial DNA out. It's around 60,000 years old. And don't forget, if he's African, he's just walked off the boat. But this is 3,000 k's in the middle of Australia, nowhere near the coast at all. You know what they said about the genes? They're extinct. They don't relate to any Homo sapiens in the world. Well, how can that be if he's African? They've got to be African. What they're saying is it looks like nobody else in the world. The reason is simple, because this is where people begin. And they went out from here and sailed out from here and went out from here in other ways and then populated the rest of the world. And as the original people tell us, and I'll use a quote of another elder, all other peoples of the world come from us. So we believe what they believe, and what we've got is buckets of science. That paper we put up, we wrote up a paper, it's just a short thing. It's been picked up by genetic magazines, scientific magazines around the world and published, much to our surprise, wasn't it, Evan?
Yeah, very surprised.
Really esteemed people, top academics. They never heard of it before, and I'm thinking Australia's been hidden from the rest of the world. There's nothing here that relates the original people to anywhere else on this planet. We know of a dreaming story that tells us how they kept the Africans out of here. Talks about the place where they had tigers and lions and stuff, and how they kept them away and used tricks to keep them away from here. It's very specific. The Africans weren't part of the world or part of this world, and the world begins here. Humanity begins in this country.
But that would make more sense. I mean, I have studied mythology for a long time, wrote a book about it, and to me, Australia is kind of like the holdout. You know, if you can find myths that exist in Australia that you find in other cultures, you know that the story comes from deep antiquity. But if the travel of culture came from Australia into these other areas, you know, keep it simple, stupid. I mean, it would make the story flow much easier, and you don't have to get over this big hurdle. Well, how did it get to Australia 60,000 years ago? Unless it came from Australia.
That's what it is. It came from, not to. You go to the first 3 pages of Genesis, and you will find 6 different dreaming stories there. They stole it. They should have put a little note down the bottom where they come from. It's plagiarism. Bayami said that people were made from the dust of the ridges. Bayami, we have a magic tree, which is called the magic tree of fire that we all came to for knowledge. To begin with, Bayami wanted all the original people to be vegetarian, just like it says in the Bible. In our story here, the bone comes from the leg, and the Bible story, it comes from the rib. It's the same story. We go through there and we just look at all those dreaming stories and we say, oh, they've just written it up in a different way. They've kept it simple so that people will remember. Don't forget the Garden of Eden, naked, and they're left in shame. Well, Australia was the only continent when Cook got here. No one wore clothes. The Garden of Eden is Australia. This is very simple. And when they were banished, and remember, Cain and Abel were banished for farming and for keeping animals. In Australia, it is against the law to dig the soil or to cage an animal. It just all falls in when you start to look at it. Once you've got that parameter of Australia, you look at all the ancient myths and they all dovetail back to here. Of course, we've got this massive obsession in the Bible with a serpent. Guess which is the oldest country in the world that venerate the serpent? The original
let's
people.
see.
The dreaming serpent.
Could it be Australia?
Yep. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm making a funny.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. Sorry, you dropped in and out. Yeah, look, it all comes back here. No matter what you look at, you'll find the sky heroes came here first, created something here first. I'm not saying that Syrians and others didn't create other Homo sapiens elsewhere, but I am saying this. When they made the Homo sapiens in Australia, they made them to be the equal of themselves, something they could incarnate into that was their equal. I suspect in other places, maybe different extraterrestrial travellers had different agendas, maybe something more compliant. And maybe today what you see amongst us is those two sets of genes, the Pleiadian genes that give us free will and independence, and the other set of genes where we see so many people that behave like sheep, that compliance. And I think we have to fight between those two patterns and raise up the higher one. The Pleiadian genes that drag us out of this need to follow and not to question. And I think that's what's going on right now. The vibrations are being lifted and the Pleiadian genes, remember the elders said we've all got their genes there, are now starting to take over. And I really suspect, because these men and women have the staffs, don't they, Evan?
They do.
They have the staffs. And when they put them in the ground, let's just hope that people have their Pleiadian genes in ascendancy, because that's going to happen too. So we do believe in the creation of different beings at different times, but it started with this mob in the Pleiades first. Mm-hmm. Others may come in later.
Well, I'm looking at the clock and our time is just about up. And so we haven't really mentioned book titles. Which one would you recommend for people to get more information about some of the material we've been talking about today?
Sean, we've just written it. And the reason we've written it first, we're going to do about 5 books about all the sites we've got, because Sean goes through the stuff we started to talk about the science and the history. And what it does is when you read that, when you look at the amazing stuff we've got, you won't get all the baggage that's been imported into your head that's a lie. You'll get rid of that and you'll start with a clean slate, knowing who these people are, knowing that the science, the history, the religion all proves they are the first race. Then when you look at the archaeology, knowing they are the first race and none of that baggage gets in the way, you can understand the real message, because that way you get it better. We've got a lot of conditioning. I'm a school teacher. I know what was being taught in schools. Most of it is rubbish. You've got to get rid of that. So Shun starts that process. It's only been out for about 2 weeks, and it's the best way to begin. Then we've got a couple more that follow.
Well, then I guess I had great time in getting you on the show. Hoo-hoo. Well, we need to wrap up. You guys are great, and we're going to have you back on because, like I said, actually, I had to really control myself in writing down questions, and I still didn't even ask all my questions. So we're going to need to get you on, have you on for a longer time, and get into. You got so much material. So
we have got heaps of material. That's what we've done. Back. We've made sure by using all these different people around the world to work with us, we can do all the parts of the picture and put it together into one big picture. So we'd love to come back. It's been a great day. Great out. Thank you.
Great. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go because I know the music should be coming up now, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Bye, Stephen. Bye, Evan.
Bye.
Bye. That's Stephen and Evan Strong. Their webpage is forgottenorigin.com. Do check it out. Check out their pictures. They're amazing. And we'll be back with Paul Von Ward after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.